Good evening, everybody. Good to see you all tonight and to be with you. I want to start with prayer requests. I'll start with two of them of my own that I know about. I just got an email from Kirk O'Keefe about an hour ago that Mike Walsh, his friend that we've been praying for, passed away last night at 9 o'clock. And so they had just gotten back from their trip and were able to be there and see him before he died, but want to pray for Mike Walsh's family. And also Ron Spar, we prayed last week, and on Sunday he had a heart cath today. They did find one blood vessel that was blocked, but it was too small to put a stent in, and so they're going to have to try and work on that with medication. So I wanted to give you an update on that as well. But any other prayer requests? Okay. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I'll just say please keep law enforcement and everybody in prayer because this is a scary time. Yeah. All first responders.
All right, let's pray. God, we thank you for this evening. We thank you for this time to be together and to talk tonight about what it means to trust in you in a very real way in our daily lives. And God, I just want to ask that you would help us tonight to, through some of the images that Jeremiah shares, think about how we relate and how we place our faith in you. We want to specifically pray tonight for the family of Mike Walsh and just pray that you would surround them with your comfort and peace right now, and as they're dealing with his loss, and Kirk and Carol as well, just a long-time friendship. Just pray that you would comfort them and just fill them with happy memories of the time they had with Mike. We also want to thank you for walking with the doctors through Ron's procedure today and being able to find the issue, and just pray that it would be quickly resolved with medication and that he'd be feeling back to normal soon. We also just want to pray for law enforcement and first responders, and we know that daily they make choices and run into danger when so many people are running away, and just want to pray your protection on them, and not just physical protection, but just their families and the pressures they face, and just pray that you would guard them and just walk through them with this very difficult job. God, we thank you for your love for us. We thank you for Jesus. In his name we pray. Amen. All right, so we're jumping ahead a little bit. I told you in the third week that we did Jeremiah 1 and 2 right back to back, but we're kind of taking bigger and bigger chunks. And so tonight, being in Jeremiah 17, almost reads a little bit like a psalm or a proverb, and has just some wisdom for us as it pertains to trusting in the Lord. And so since it was a shorter passage, I do like to read them ahead of time just so we can kind of get a feel. As John was teaching and talking to us, we've already kind of encountered it. So I'm going to read that and then jump into our video. Chapter 17, verse 1 says, Judah's sin is engraved with an iron tool, inscribed with a flint point on the tablets of their hearts and on the horns of their altars. Even their children remember their altars and Asherah poles beside the spreading trees and on the high hills. My mountain and the land and your wealth and all your treasures I will give away as plunder, together with your high places, because of sin throughout your country. Through your own fault you will lose the inheritance I gave you. I will enslave you to your enemies in a land you do not know, for you have kindled my anger, and it will burn forever. This is what the Lord says. Cursed is the one who trusts in man, who draws strength from mere flesh, and whose heart turns away from the Lord. That person will be like a bush in the wastelands. They will not see prosperity when it comes. They will dwell in the parched places of the desert, in a salt land where no one lives. But blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in him. They will be like a tree planted by the water that sends out its roots by the stream. It does not fear when heat comes. Its leaves are always green. It has no worries in a year of drought and never fails to bear fruit. The heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it? I, the Lord, search the heart and examine the mind to reward each person according to their conduct, according to what their deeds deserve. Like a partridge that hatches eggs it did not lay, are those who gain riches by unjust means. When their lives are half gone, their riches will desert them, and in the end they will prove to be fools. A glorious throne, exalted from the beginning, is the place of our sanctuary. Lord, you are the hope of Israel. All who forsake you will be put to shame. Those who turn away from you will be written in the dust, because they have forsaken the Lord, the spring of living water.
The book of Jeremiah is filled with several different types of literature. There's narrative, there's prophecy, there's images or parables, or sometimes enacted metaphors that Jeremiah lives out, right? Go bury this cloth. Go down to the potter's house. And then sometimes we get some wisdom literature right in the middle of Jeremiah. And that's what we find in Jeremiah chapter 17. It actually feels like it might belong in the book of Psalms or in the book of Proverbs. And at times it feels like we're actually overlapping some with some of the content there. But I think this all fits in with Jeremiah's overall purpose and message. And it fits in with what I think God is wanting to try to do through the voice of Jeremiah. He's trying to call his people into wisdom. He's trying to get them to think about the way that they're living their lives. Remember, the whole of the book of Jeremiah really is this meditation on the downfall of the people of Judah into idolatry, and then that ends in their exile. And I think as we meditate on this book, we're supposed to ask ourselves, how could we avoid some of those similar moves? How can we stray away from the path that they took so that we don't make our lives like them? And much like the book of Proverbs, or much like the book of Psalms, several times we're given instructions as to these are good practices to take on. These are things that you can do that help to keep you from heading down the wrong path. It's an invitation to think about your life, to consider the ways that you're traveling down and wonder, maybe I need to make a different choice. Maybe I need to think about the way that I'm aligning my heart and aligning my life so that I'm someone who actually honors the Lord. That as I look at my life, I realize that I am like a tree planted by streams of water or something like that. Now, Proverbs chapter 1 says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And I think really this idea that we fear the Lord, it leads us into this place where we can then begin to understand what wisdom really is. Understanding who God is and placing him in proper perspective then allows us to take stock of our lives. It allows us to take stock of what we're doing and kind of assess the underlying motivations for what we do. And Proverbs have a way of sort of bringing some of those things to the surface and causing us to evaluate this. So I think in Jeremiah chapter 17, what we're dealing with is these Proverbs that really push us to ask this question: do I trust in Yahweh? Do I really trust in God? This section of the book of Jeremiah breaks down with several different sort of subsections. The first one comes in verses 1 through 4. I think what happens in verses 1 through 4 is we get the critique of the people. It says this: the sin of Judah is inscribed with an iron stylus. With a diamond point, it is engraved on the tablets of their hearts and on the horns of their altars. The sins have been written down. Just like the law, the sins are written down, but it's not written down on a tablet. It's not written down on a piece of paper. Instead, this is written on their hearts. Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 16 says, "Circumcise, therefore, the foreskin of your heart, and no longer be stubborn." And the people, it seems, did not listen to the words of Deuteronomy. They didn't circumcise their heart. Instead, they inscribed their sin on their heart with an iron stylus. It seems that this is permanent. It's staying on there. It's so deeply engraved. Everybody can see it. It's not going anywhere. It seems now the only possible solution is for them to have a new heart altogether. And in that sense, we look forward to Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 33, where God says, I will put my law within them, and I will write it on their hearts. Yes, the people need God to do a miracle to give them a new heart. Verse 2, while their children remember their altars and their Asherah poles by the green trees on the high hills. They engage in this idolatrous worship, it seems, under trees and on high places. Frequently in the ancient world, worship would happen on high places, right? And so what's happening here is the people are engaging in all of this idolatrous worship, these terrible practices on high hills under green trees. Verse 3, my mountains in the countryside. I think it's kind of interesting. God says, listen, I'm the one who gave you those, and you're using them to abuse your relationship with me. I will give up your wealth, God says, and all your treasures as plunder because of the sin of your high places and all your borders. And you will, on your own, relinquish your inheritance. The word relinquish there is used in Deuteronomy chapter 15. Interestingly, this is the chapter that talks about the 7th year debt release that the people of Israel are supposed to practice in their midst. So once every 7 years, they're supposed to let people go free, right? You're supposed to release any debts that people have against their brothers. In fact, it says, whatever your brother owes you, Deuteronomy 15, verse 3, whatever your brother owes you, you must release it. Same word here. You will on your own release your inheritance, not to someone who you took it from, but rather to those who will take it from you. I will make you serve your enemies in a land you do not know, for you have set my anger on fire, and it will burn forever. Now, the word there, forever, is until future lasting time, until a really long period in the distance. The word that we often translate as forever doesn't always mean forever, as in absolutely until the very end of any calculation of time. Golden Gay says, it really is until I have reason to change my mind. And I think that's the case here. God says, my anger will continue to burn perpetually. Notice, God persists with his people, though, even into their destruction. I think a normal human reaction to this would be like, fine, I'm leaving. I'm letting you do your own thing, and I'm leaving you to the consequences of your own choices. But here it seems that God is saying, no, I'm staying with you. My anger is burning against you, but I'm staying with you throughout all of this, as you deal with all of the consequences of your actions. And so the next section, verses 5 through 8. I think what's happening here is we're getting this image of curse and bless. It sounds a little, as we read it, like Psalm chapter 1. But blessing and cursing are used here, and they aren't really used much, or at least the word cursing isn't really used much in Psalm chapter 1. It reminds us of Deuteronomy 27 and 28. As the people come into the land, they're supposed to stand on Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim, two mountains sort of right next to each other, and they're supposed to sort of read out all of these curses or all of these blessings. And as they announce them back and forth, the people realize what they are supposed to do. And so, perhaps these blessings and curses are less connected to salvation and more just connected to good or disaster. If you do the things that God has asked, then you are going to experience good in life. And if you fail to do the things that God has asked, then you're going to invite disaster on your own life. And so, Deuteronomy chapter 28, the section that details all of the curses that are going to come to the people, it ends with the last curse being exile. And that, of course, is what the people are facing here. So, this is what the Lord says, verse 5. Cursed is the person who trusts in mankind. This person here is a strong or mighty one. That's the Hebrew word used. It highlights the inability of this person to secure his own future. Yes, he might be the strong and mighty one, and yet he trusts in mankind. He makes human flesh his strength, and his heart turns from the Lord. He looks strong, perhaps on the outside, but in reality, he's unable to do much of anything. The problem is that he trusts in mankind, in Adam, in humans. That's his problem. Instead, he should be trusting in the Lord. In fact, verse 6, he will be like a juniper in the Arava. He cannot see when good comes, but dwells in the parched places in the wilderness. He is like an isolated, soon to wither bush. It has no prospects for flourishing. Its roots cannot go deep, and there it sits in the middle of the wilderness, and no one will even know when it withers up and dies. In a salt land, it says, where no one lived. In Jeremiah chapter 2, God was the only way that they survived in the wilderness, if you remember our discussion of Jeremiah chapter 2. Now, where no one lives, right, in the wilderness where God sustained them, here, this bush is just out there, isolated, alone in the wilderness, in a salt land where no one lives. This is the home of the salt sea, or as we call it today, the Dead Sea. Verse 7, yet the person who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence indeed is the Lord, he is blessed. In contrast, then, we're given this picture of a person who actually trusts in Yahweh. And the confidence or reliance is in God himself. This person, experiences good because of his choices. Verse 8, he will be like a tree planted by water. It sends its roots out toward a stream. It doesn't fear when heat comes. Its foliage remains green. It will not worry in a year of drought or cease producing fruit. So the image here is that of a well-supplied, well-watered tree. It never lacks water. And I think it's a little bit of a play on words with verse 6, right? It will not fear when the heat comes. That phrase in Hebrew sounds almost identical to a will not see of verse 6. Notice that the water proximity does not eliminate the threat of drought, right? It's not that for this individual who is like a tree who sends out its roots towards a stream, it's not that that individual never experiences drought or never experiences heat. The heat still comes. The reality is that the heat is just neutralized. In other words, its roots, its foundation, keep it safe in the time of heat and in the time of drought because it is always watered. And so it will not cease fruit bearing even within that season of heat and drought. And it will not worry because its roots go deep. I think the message here then is trust in Yahweh. Above all else, trust in Yahweh. Maybe it doesn't make sense. Maybe you feel like everybody else around you isn't trusting in the Lord, but if you trust in the Lord, I think God is saying, it makes you like a tree with roots that spread out into water. And you've always got a source to pull from. You've always got what you need in order to survive. Your alternative is to fail to trust in the Lord, to trust instead in people, and they will always let you down. Verse 9 begins a new section, I think, 9 through 13. And here, the idea seems to be our heart. As we move from topic to topic here, bouncing around with these different ideas or different principles for how to live a wise life, so verse 9 says, the heart is more deceitful than anything else. In Hebrew, the word heart is actually the place of understanding and decisions. It's not that way in English, right? The heart is the place that we feel. It's the place where I sort of decide, how do I feel? And then I'm gonna go with my heart over my mind. I'm not going to think about my decision. If I go with my heart, I'm just going to go with what I feel. Not so in Hebrew. In Hebrew, you make decisions with your heart. You think with your heart. And as you're going throughout life, you you try to consider what exactly is happening in my heart. And then how does that allow me to make decisions that are wise, to make decisions that honor the Lord? And Jeremiah says, the heart is more deceitful than anything else and incurable. Who can understand it? Elsewhere in Jeremiah, this word incurable is used for a wound that just will not heal. You try to patch it up, but it won't heal. You try to bandage it, but it will not heal. And this final question, who can understand it, I think sets up Yahweh's answer. Verse 10, I, the Lord, examine, and there the word is heart, once again. He is the one who examines or searches out this seat of understanding. And I test. And then he says, I test your inner parts, right? The kidneys actually is the word used here. Our translations usually don't go with that because that sounds very strange. How does God test our kidneys? But I think this is the idea, right? Your heart in Hebrew is the place that you think, and your kidneys are the place where you sort of feel, and they're sort of the seat of your deepest emotions. In fact, in the Old Testament, both joy and agony are said to emerge from your kidneys, from this most secret part inside of you. And so God says, I am the one who tests those places. I am the one who both searches what you're thinking, and I test what you're feeling deep down inside. Kellerman says that the kidneys are the seat of the innermost human emotions in Hebrew. And I think that's what's happening here. And God says, then I give to each according to his way, according to what his actions deserve. Yahweh is the one who knows who is who, from verses 5 through 8. Yahweh is the one who is able to tell if a tree is like a bush isolated in the wilderness that's going to wither and die, or if it's like a tree planted by streams of water. And so, verse 11, he who makes a fortune unjustly is like a partridge that hatches eggs it didn't lay. In the middle of his life, his riches will abandon him. Perhaps the idea here is of a male partridge who sits on its partner's eggs until they hatch. And I think this is a clear and consistent concern of biblical authors. We're talking about money, right? How do you make your money? How do you make your fortune? And as is typical of biblical writers, the concern is not so much how much money do you have. The concern is how did you get it, right? The biblical authors are very concerned with the methods we use to attain money, to gain money for ourselves. And so, watch out how you're getting your money. Verse 12, a glorious throne on high from the beginning is the place of our sanctuary, the Lord, the hope of Israel. All who abandon you will be put to shame. All who turn away from me will be written in the dirt, for they have abandoned the Lord, the fountain of living water. So I think the message of this last section is make sure that you continue to trust the Lord. Make sure that you don't abandon the hope of Israel, the one who called you from the very beginning. And so this section really wraps up with this idea of trusting in the Lord in all the areas of your life. Trusting that not only will I flourish if I trust the Lord, but also I can have confidence to know that God sees exactly what I've done. God knows the depths of who we are, and He penetrates past all of the filters that we put up. He penetrates past all of the facades that we might place in front of us, and He sees the truth. He sees the reality. His gaze cuts deep into who we are, into the heart of who we are. And so I think this chapter really leaves us with this message of trusting in the Lord. So what about you? Do you place your trust in Yahweh? If the Lord is looking in your heart right now, can you honestly say that your trust, that your hope is found solely in Him? Or have you spent your days, your week, your month, your years pursuing your own interests, pursuing your own ways, trusting, as it says early in the chapter, in mankind, in humanity, hoping that perhaps politics, perhaps power, perhaps money, perhaps influence. All of these things maybe will solve my problems. And the reality is, those who fail to trust in Yahweh will be like that bush withering in the wilderness. So who do you trust? Do you trust in the Lord, or do you trust in others? Because those who trust in the Lord will find that their strength is renewed day by day. They will find that they're like a tree planted by streams of water. They will find that they flourish in all that they do, not because that they're great, not because they have some sort of innate value that nobody else has, but rather because they found the true source of life. Trusting in Yahweh is the way to live. And I think Jeremiah gives us an invitation to that life here in this chapter.
All right. A little different than some of the passages we've looked at the last few weeks, but with all the images and ideas that Jeremiah puts forth here, I wanted to ask, which of them, did any of them stand out to you? Any of the images or ideas that he talks about?
The tree that was withering and the tree that was planted by the water.
Yeah. That kind of easy comparison for us to visualize what our souls look like when we trust in God. What else? What else stood out to you?
Just the thought that we're real dumb if we don't trust Him.
It's kind of like Tom usually says, his professor said, God wins, pick a team, don't be stupid. You
got it?
What'd you say, Dave?
Our sin being written down with the New American Standard says an iron stylus with a diamond point.
Mm-hmm.
Without Jesus, that's the way it is.
Yeah. What else? Any other images seen it? Daniel?
Not to worry about your place in the economy, just worry about your place in God's hand.
Mm-hmm.
And not in His hands.
Yeah.
And just trust in Him with all your heart.
I think one of the things that it wasn't an image that he used, but he began talking about this idea of what wisdom is. And I think all of us, everybody, I think, wants wisdom. There's not really any bad things about wisdom. And so, but it's sometimes hard to define what wisdom is. And I had a class in my grad school, my last semester of classes, it was class in culture. And one of the things the professor said is, the more information that you have available to you, the less knowledge that you have. And that sounds the opposite of what should be true. We think about how just my generation, like I don't know probably as much as you do or your dad did about certain things. So, and part of that is because I can look anything up. I can just go to YouTube and figure out how to fix my dryer or not fix my dryer since it didn't work. But there's certain things that you have more information, you remember less, you store less, and then the less knowledge you have, then the less wisdom that you have. And so it sounds like the opposite of what should be true. That you think with basically, the internet and everything available at our fingertips, we should be wiser than ever, and yet that's not really the case. And so I just thought about that in terms of this idea of finding God in chaos. Because sometimes all of that information can be chaotic. And the answer to that, then, Jeremiah's answer, or God's answer through Jeremiah, is this idea of trusting in God. That amidst all of the information and knowledge and all of that trusting in God, like you said, Daniel, is like that's the most important thing of what you can do. And so, I think back, I love that our children right now on Sunday mornings are learning about wisdom. And my boys have both come home this week and praying at nighttime and at the dinner table without my prompting for God to give them wisdom, because James talks about it. If anyone desires wisdom, you should ask God for it. And so I think that this idea of wisdom here, as Jeremiah presents it, is wisdom is to trust in God. And so I think that just stood out to me as this idea of, it's sometimes hard to define wisdom, but at its core, the best thing that we can do, the most right decision that we can make is trusting God for everything. The other thing that stood out to me goes along with what Joe said, there's two trees. And John saying that the tree planted by the water does not eliminate the threat of drought. And I like that because It's kind of like when Jesus tells about the man who builds his house on the rock and the man who builds his house on the sand, and the storms come. And what he's saying is the one who's built on a solid foundation still experiences the storms of life. The tree still experiences the heat and the drought. It just doesn't overcome it. And I think that we as Christians sometimes, maybe if we're immature in our faith or new in our faith, think, okay, if I come to Jesus, then everything in my life is going to get better. And I think that's ultimately true, that everything does get better in Jesus, but that doesn't mean that we are just not going to face trials and hardships and things like that, but that we can stand up in the midst of them. So, second thing I want to do this evening is I want to read from Psalm chapter 1. There's a lot of comparisons here. It's not very long, it's just a few verses. It says, blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. Not so the wicked. They are like chaff that the wind blows away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked leads to destruction. So a lot of similarities there, particularly that image of that tree is present in both. And I like to imagine, I don't know this is true, but I'd like to imagine, given that we see this in both places, that this is kind of a common image that maybe Israelites used for their children. You know, you like kind of telling them, you want to be like a tree planted by water, something that kind of is ingrained in their mind. But with that in mind, and you don't have to answer out loud because this could be a deeply personal thing that maybe you don't want to share. Maybe this is more of a reflection question, but if you were to describe your spiritual life with an agricultural metaphor, maybe a flourishing oak tree or a dry cactus in the desert or a withering rose bush, what image would you choose and why? Does anybody want to answer that question? It's okay.
I chose the flourishing oak tree.
Okay, why do you say that?
Because I feel like Jesus helped me through my day, through all of our times. If I have a problem, I just pray to him. It seems like it works out.
I like the idea of an oak tree too, because oak trees take a really long, I think get really big, but they take a long time to grow. And I think that when you think about, you know, your maturity of following Jesus over a lifetime, you know, how we have right now in our neighborhood oak trees that are planted like this far from the sidewalk. And I just think, give it 20 years and those things are going to be tearing up everything. And so, because that's oak, but I also think, well, the builders, they don't care because it's going to be 30 years from now before that starts to happen. But
Our neighborhood is already there.
so yeah, but you see, it takes a long time
Damaging
to.
the street, damaging beautiful trees, but.
And they put paper driveways in everybody's driveway, so those pavers are going to be all messed up. But this idea of it taking a long time to get there, and it takes a long, hard trust in God through the course of your life to get to that oak tree point. Anybody else have an image in mind? It doesn't have to be one of those three.
Well, I feel like a transplanted tree, where I was a withered young tree, and then God moved me
Yeah.
over by the river.
Cool.
Oh.
I think life experiences just give you a reason to trust in God.
Mhm. Yeah, the longer, and maybe like you just saying, you know, that maybe you try the one way first, and then you realize that God's way is better, and it takes a course of time to learn that. Last question as we wrap up: how would your life look different this week if you chose to trust in the Lord in every situation? What barriers do you think you might encounter in doing that? So maybe to phrase it another way, what situations in your life right now do you feel like you need to trust God the most? Maybe that's a better way to ask that question.
It's about surrendering. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Sometimes we like to be in control,
Mhm.
and we have to surrender, and just like, you know what, I have to surrender this, this is not. I want to take control, but I
Yeah.
I'm in control of everything, so it's
Yeah.
just surrendering everything.
I
and
think
trusting
about
him more.
control a lot when in terms of travel, because Kelsey, my wife, hates flying. She's like, I'm sitting next to her in a plane, I got like nail marks on my arm. But it's funny because she would prefer to drive everywhere, and I get much more nervous about driving long distances because I have a little bit of control. On a plane, I have no control. If that thing goes down, I can't do anything about it. So I kind of like, and so it's the idea of like we think having control is better, but for me in that instance, like having no control and just giving it over to the pilot who knows what he's doing, gives me more peace. And so it's kind of interesting that because if we try to have control, we don't have control of anything hardly in our lives. And the minute we think we do, something comes along and crashes all of that. And so giving up that control surrender. Carrie, you had.
I disagree with what Z said. There's a lot of fear and a lot of stressful things going on. And instead of sitting and worrying and stress all the time, I can try harder to be closer to God and stop worrying all the time.
It's hard, yeah.
One of the things, being the husband, being a father, and my children aren't with me, but nonetheless, I still feel that fatherly protectiveness or whatever over them. And I think we're always one day closer to the Lord coming back. And we all know that before that happens, things are going to get bad here on earth. And how deeply we're into that, I don't know, but it doesn't look good. And so if things really go south, which could happen real quick, just a few things could happen, things go really south. And so I thought about being, living in a place where you're far from big cities, so those people can't come out and, take advantage of you, take your stuff and all that, and when to do that, and where to do that, and all that weighs on my mind. Should I be getting ready now? Should I be, what should I do? And one of the reasons is even for protection for my family. If I've got some place they can come to if things get bad, that I'm protecting them as well.
I think about those things too, but in the end, it comes down to just trusting that God's in control, kind of like you on the plane with a pilot.
Mm-hmm.
Things could go bad.
Yeah.
If they do, they're going to be bad. But what can you do? You've got to trust in the one that's in control.
Carly?
I think sometimes we want to give it to God, then we want to take it back.
Yeah, definitely.
Are you going to be able, maybe I better do this? No, I already said I'd give it to you, I just got to give it to you.
Or when things are good, we'll give it to him, and then when things get rough, we start to, try to take it. Yeah, that's definitely true.
I think one of the most important verses is verse 5, where it says, "Cursed is the man who trusts in mankind." So you have two choices. You trust in God or you trust in mankind. I don't want to be cursed, so I'm going to trust in God.
And I think about, we had a debate last night, presidential
Oh, boy.
debate, and two people telling you why you should trust each of them and that the other could not be trusted. And, that's not to say that we shouldn't invest in those things and take seriously those things, but this idea of, if we're putting our, kind of like I talked about on Sunday, if we're putting our sole hope in either one of those, we're in trouble, and so not just because of who they are, but because of just trusting in man. And so certainly, like I said on Sunday, we want to bring our faith into our politics, but if that's the only place our faith is, then we are off base for sure. I thought about too that he said the heart. I might be missing part of this, but the heart is deceitful above all things, and how often we see in our culture just follow your heart or whatever makes you happy, and that idea of if I just do what I want, then everything will be good. If I'm just my authentic self, and those kind of things, and how deceitful we can, our own hearts, emotions, ideas can be to ourselves, and how it goes back to the idea of wisdom and trusting in God over all that. So. Anything else? Any other comments, questions, things that stood out to you? Before we go, I'll, as you think, just give you our idea for practicing faith this week. Take a walk through nature and meditate on this verse. There's a lot of nature metaphors and images here. So maybe that's, taking some time noticing trees or bushes. Maybe it's the oak tree, or you see this little withering weed kind of thing. And think about where you are in relation to those things. Where is your heart in relation to how God is growing you in your faith? So any other questions or comments for tonight?
So I like what he said in there about the word heart, all throughout the Bible, is not what we think it is, non-organ. So it's cardia in Greek, and it's more of the definition for the Bible be a place of understanding and emotion and your will, source of motives, spring of consciousness, and a figurative core of your being, or more accurate.
Yeah. I think about how we're told to love the Lord with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. That all of those, we think of them as kind of four distinct things, but they're all kind of interwoven and a part of that core part of who we are. I also thought it was just kind of funny that he said, like, our kidneys. That's like, I love you with all my kidneys. Like, I don't think that's going to make my wife feel very loved if I go home and for Valentine's Day we give him a card with a kidney on it. Try that. Tell me how it goes for you. All right. Any other thing before we have fun tonight? All right. Well, thank you for coming, and we'll see you on.